Well, good morning, everyone. It's 5:07 a.m. I just couldn't sleep well, so I decided to come here and continue with the videos that I started yesterday. Just to remind you about what we talked about yesterday, or what I talked about yesterday. Um, we talked about the while loop, and you can see an example here for a while loop. And if I would just going to go through this assignment, this example, I have my counter, I have my condition here, and I have my update for my counter. So those are the three keys that are very important in a while loop. The initialization for your counter, and then the test for your counter, and the update for your counter. You set the counter to initial value, and then you're going to start testing it. As long as this test composite true, you're going to basically execute this loop. And whenever this condition becomes false, you leave the loop. And as you can see here, I'm updating the counter by plus plus. Now we're going to move on to a different types of loops, what we call for loops. Now, a for loop basically is not that big a different. I'm just going to show you how it works. You start with the keyword for, and this is very important. You open a parenthesis and close it, and then you open a curly brace and you close it. Now, what do we put here? Well, this here is going to be the body of the loop, just like we had before. So let me copy my message here, John Cena. And in this area here, unlike the while loop, where we basically have the initialization for my counter and the test and the update in three different statements or three different lines, I can put them all in the same space or same place inside the for loop. So in this area between those parentheses, I'm going to do the same thing, integer. I'm just going to call it C-O-N, and I initialize it to 0, and then I'm going to say C-O-U-N is less than 10, and then I'm going to say C-O-U-N plus plus. So as you can see here, those three elements that I had with the while loop, I actually just listed them all together between those parentheses for the for loop, which basically make it a little bit shorter than the while loop, but basically is going to get the same job done. Very important to understand that those are semicolons because I've seen some students doing them as colons. And also remember, do not put anything here. Again, do not put anything here. And by anything, I basically means don't put a semicolon. That's wrong. Let's take that out. So this basically will print the John Cena message 10 times, and this will print it 10 times. So I'm supposed to get 20 times John Cena printed on the screen. Let me just have a breaker here. So system.out.print line. I'm just going to put, let's say, dashes to separate the 10 from the other 10. So let's run it. Oops, there is a problem. Let's see here. Oh yeah, semicolon. Let's run it again. And here we go. Those are my first John Cena, and those are my second 10 John Cena. Okay, so this is basically what for loop is all about. As you can see here, it's very, very compact comparing to the while loop. And as I said before, I'm going to talk about the differences between them later. But basically, both of them will get the same job done. We have different types of for loops. And just let me open the PowerPoint file here. The other type of for loop is basically in this area here. And again, I can apply the same concept for a while loop, of course, but I'm just going to show you an example here. Just imagine I do have two variables. I could come here and say C1 equals 0, and then comma, and then C2 equal, let's say, 10. And in this area, I will come and say and of course I need to change this to be C1. As long as C1 is less than 10 and C2 is greater than 0, Let's put 2 here. And here I'll say C1 plus plus, comma, C2 minus minus. So what did I just did here? Well, as you can see here, it's very, very similar to the previous case, but the difference here, I have another variable initialized with 10, I have another condition or Boolean expression, and I have another update. Well, basically, at the beginning, C1 is going to be initialized to 0, C2 is going to be initialized to 10. And then after that, I'm saying here, as long as this whole Boolean expression is true, that C1 is greater than 10 and C2 is less, C1 is less than 10 and C2 is greater than 0, then keep going with the while loop. And I'm doing here, I'm updating C1 by increasing it by 1, C2, I'm decreasing it by 1. Again, there's no specific purpose of what I'm doing here, but what I'm saying here, you can have multiple initialized values, and you can have a little bit more complicated Boolean expression. I can put OR here if I want. Again, it depends on the problem that you're trying to solve. Again, even though we have this case and it's available for us, but we usually don't use it that frequently. So I just thought about letting you guys know about this. Let me just copy this breaker. So you'll see that I'll get the same exact results. And let's give it a run. And here we go. As you can see here, I got those 30 John Cena printed on screen. So this is basically what a for loop is. After that, we are going to talk about the while loop, which is the last type of a loop. Then after that, we're going to talk about nested loops, and then after that, we are going to talk about why do we need loops. So a do while loop basically is very similar to the while loop, and again, I'm going to use the same example here. You start with the keyword do, and then you open a curly brace, and then you close it, and then you go here and you type while, and you have a condition here. Remember, this is a little bit different. This is a little bit tricky that people always forget about. You need to put a semicolon here. Unlike the while loop here that you don't put any semicolons here, the do while you have to follow that with a semicolon. And I think I have an extra close curly brace. Now, I'm going to come here and say integer, let's see, 3 for example, or counter 2 equals 0. And here I'll come here and say counter 2 is less than 10. So as long as this condition is true, forgot the semicolon, keep going. And again, I'm going to show the same message. Just copy that, put this here. Let me copy the breaker. And the breaker, basically, I mean the line that separates those print messages. Now, do while is very similar or close to the while loop. So, as you can see here, I got the initialization variable, and here I got the Boolean expression. But what am I missing here is the update for the counter 2. So I'm going to come here, type counter 2 plus plus. Of course, you can put it at the top, you can put it at the bottom, it doesn't matter. Okay, so how does this thing work? Well, basically, as you can see here, we start with the keyword do. Remember, there's nothing in this area here, no semicolon. You open a curly brace, you close it, you put the while statement here, and you put your Boolean expression here. As long as this condition, or this Boolean expression, is true, you gotta keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, until this becomes false, and then after that, you leave. So let's just put a message here for the leave. Let's say goodbye. Okay, so let me just go and talk about, let me just run it first. And here we go. Well, actually, I'm supposed to have 4. So this is the first one, second one, third one, and this is the fourth one. Okay, so what is the difference between the while, the for loop, and the do while? Well, usually, and this is very important, whenever you try to get a loop done, or you know that you need to get something repeatedly executed, Whenever you know how much exactly, and remember this, how much exactly you want that instructions or set of instructions to be repeated, this is a straight for loop. Go with a for loop with no problems. So whenever you know that my program needs to execute this block of code 10, 20, 30, you know that number, then you go with for loops. Now, whenever you're not certain about how many times this block of code needs to be executed, that's where you go while loop or you go do while loop. And I'm going to talk about the differences in a sec. So when you know how many times, you go for loop. When you're not sure, you go while loop or do while loop. Now, what's the difference between a while loop and a do while loop? Well, the main difference here is this is what we call a post test. And this is what we call a pre-test. Now, why do we call this one a pre-test? Because we do test the Boolean expression at the beginning of the loop, and then we do the execution. With the do while, we actually do the execution and then we do the test. That's the main difference. So how is that going to affect on my program execution overall? Well, with the do while, and again, this is a case, not this one, but in cases where I know for sure that I need to execute this block of code at least one time, and then I test, then you go with the do while. With a while loop, no, there's a possibility that this condition will be false at the beginning, so you're going to skip the whole thing. What do I mean by that? Let me just put 100 here. And when you're going to come here and say counter is less than 10, well, what is the value of counter? It's 100. And 100 is not less than 10, so this is going to be false. And because it's false, the program is going to skip this those two statements here and just continue with execution. So this is a case here where I got the condition here to be false from the beginning, so I'm going to skip the body of the loop. Let's just go put it back to 0. Let's go down here. What if I do the same here? I'm going to put 100. And let's look at what's going to happen here. Well, I'm going to execute this. I'm going to increase counter by 2 by 1, so it's going to be 101. And then I'm going to get here, and it's going to be 101 is less than 10, which is false. So I'm going to skip it, and I'm going to leave the whole do while loop. So as you can see the difference here, previously I did the test before I go inside the loop. And because the test was false, so I skipped it, and that was basically with the while loop. But here with the do while loop, no, I'm going to execute it first and then test. And if the test came with a false result, then you're just going to skip it and go to the next line in the executions. And that's basically the main difference between those three types of while loops. Loops in general. Now, what I'm going to do here, and I think I mentioned this before, but I'm just going to mention it again. We have what we call a short circuit operators. So what is a short circuit operators? A short circuit operators basically means sometimes you can have more than two expressions, and I think I mentioned that before. For example, I'll say 10 equal 10, just for the purpose. Even though he's complaining about that, but just keep it that way. So what I'm saying here, if this condition is false, there is no need to check the other part of this Boolean expression, because whether this one is true or false, because the first one is false, then the whole thing is going to be false. You will see that in the PowerPoint, so I decided to give it a mention. But again, usually our while loops and do while loops and those expressions are not complicated Boolean expressions with and and or, but sometimes you may find yourself need to use them. Now what I'm going to do, which is the last part of this course, or this chapter, is what we call a nested loop. Now a nested loop, this is one of the topics that get people or students and programmers a little bit confused. Now what is a nested loop? A nested loop basically is when you have a loop inside a loop. So what does that mean? Okay. Let's take an example here. By the way, after I'm done with this, I'm going to go and choose in In the Blackboard, or in the Cengage, I mentioned that there are 4 exercises that you need to answer. I will pick another one beside those 4 and answer it here so you will have an idea about what it is, or maybe 2. So let me just go and talk about nested loops, and after that, this will be the end of uh, of this chapter. So what is a nested loop? Well, a nested loop basically is when you have a loop inside a loop. And let me just comment this section here because I don't need it anymore. And I'm going to post this file later. So what is a nested loop? Well, as I said, nested loop is a loop inside a loop. Now you may ask a question, why would I want to put a loop inside a loop? Well, I'll give you some examples here. You know, images, digital images or digital pictures. What are digital pictures? Basically, it's a 2-dimension of pixels. Pixels is a tiny dot of light information. So you have, when you talk about resolution of a screen, what are you talking about basically? You're talking about how many rows and how many columns here. So if you want to have access to one element or one pixel in that picture, basically you need to know it's what row and what column it is. What if you want to scan the whole thing? Well, you need to have a nested loop. One of them is going to scan the rows, and for each row, you're going to have another loop that will scan each column. And that's basically how you have access to those elements and 2-dimensionals. Now, let me just show you an example of what if I want to print, let's say, a square of stars. So I'm going to say integer size equal, let's say, 5. Now look what I'm going to do. I'm going to come here and say for integer row equals 0. And as long as row is less than size, row plus plus. Open curly brace and close it. Now I'm going to do this. This is going to scan the rows. And now I'm going to have another for loop. And this time I'm going to say integer column equals 0. And as long as column is less than the size 2, because it's a square, and then C++. And all I have to do here is the following. Let's go ahead here. System.out.print line. Now I'm going to put an asterisk and a space. Now, this is not going to print an actual square of stars. I'm just going to print, not print line. So this, basically, if I run it, I will end up having a really long stream of asterisks. So let's run it. Here it is. This is not a square. So all I have to do here is to come in this area and type system.out.print line. And I'm going to explain why. Because this here is going to give you access to raw 0. And for raw 0, you're going to go C0, C1, C2, C3, C4, printing this for 5 times. Right after that, you move back to raw and you change it to 1, and then you go C0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and printing 5 stars. Without this line, basically, they're going to be next to each other. So every time you're done with one scan for one row, before you move to the next row, you have to go to the next line. And let me just run it. And now you can see it's a star, arrays of stars. What else? Let's see. What if I want to print the timetable for, let's say, 2 and 3 and 4? Let's do that. So I'm going to say the timetable. Yeah, let's just do the timetable. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put it down here. And I'll just start here with 2. And we're going to go set 2 and 3 and 4. So we'll put 4 here. And we want to include 4. And now we're going to start the multiplication from 1 all the way to 10. And I'm going to put print line here. And in this area, look what I'm going to do. I'm going to start by r plus, and let's open a parentheses and put the multiplication, which is, we're going to use x, plus c. Remember, r is going to represent what it is, c is going to represent, plus, let's put an equal, and then after that, plus the actual value of multiplying r by c. And that basically means, you know what I can do? I can just put them in the same line. Put plus, I'm going to put plus t. This is a skip character, means add a tap between them. And then after that, I'm going to go and go down. So basically, each raw table is going to be in one row. Let me just run it so you'll see what I mean by that. So look at this here. Times 2 times 1, 2, 2 times 2, 4, 2 times 3, 6, all the way to, where's 10? Oh, of course, I forgot to include 10. Let's run that again. And as you can see here, that's the results. Well, let's make it a little bit more interesting. I'm going to put 1 here. I'm going to put 10 here. And let's run it. And here we go. 1 times 1, 2 times 1, 3 times 1. Or you can look at it in rows. 1 all the way to 10, and then 2 all the way to 10. And this is the timetable. This used to be a really, really big nightmare for me when I was in elementary school, to memorize all these numbers. Anyway, I guess this will be it for this part. I will try to provide you with more examples about loops. I'm going to choose 2 of the questions in the Cengage that are not assignments and answer them, and you're going to have to answer the 4 that I picked. So I'll just say goodbye right now, and I'll see you guys soon.